Well, good morning and welcome to my kitchen. I say morning because it's around 10:30, 10:45 or so in the morning here. We're at time filming. Good morning. Have your coffee. And what I decided to do today is to make a German apple pancake. Um, I also call it a Cornish apple pancake, which is probably the one I'm going to end up making a bit more of today because I do try and do these in one take so that it's like we were together having coffee and making breakfast. So, you know, I'm going to guess that you've got some company over for breakfast or your family and you're making them breakfast. So you want to do this within a relatively short period of time, right? So we're talking about peeling the apple, which is why I'm using this apple peeler core. And it works really well. One of my wife's favorite tools in the kitchen is this because it works so well. And once we're done with that, you can see how fast the apple gets cored. We just throw that into the compost bin, release this, and then pull it off the sink or counter. We're going to put that away. And you end up with a cored apple. It's going to look something like this. And you can see it's spiraled. So we need to clip it. So we're just going to make 2 cuts. And now we're going to sprinkle that into the bowl here. Now, because this is the second time I've done it, I'm not going to add as much butter. So you add 3 or 4 pats of butter to the top of your apple. And if I were doing more, if I was doing this for guests, I would probably use a knife, not my hands, to do that part of the apple business. And away we go. I like to do these for about 3 to 4.5 minutes, sometimes 6, depending on how the apples are going. As a result, I do this in 99 seconds because that's the longest number you can put in your microwave with just 2 finger touches. I'm going to put this in for 99 seconds. Now, this is the second apple I've put in here. One of the things you learn when you're on your second episode is put your phone in airplane mode. That way a random message doesn't come in across the screen while you're taping and you guys start again. The first batch of apple pancakes I've had have been in the oven for 6 minutes. Got 16 more to go. Okay. Now, while that's cooking up, if I was doing this just one off, what I would be doing is while my apples are cooling off, and I have, by the way, an entire bowl here of apples that are nice and cool. So they're, by the way, my brother suggested using mirrors so you can see what I'm doing. Sure, whatever. This is a really super duper easy recipe. It is 3/4 of a cup of flour and 3/4 of a cup of milk and 4 eggs, a dash of salt. And that's it for the batter. Okay. So with my quarter cup measuring cup, we're just going to measure that out. We've got 3/4 of a cup of flour, and to that we're going to add a dash of salt. A dash of salt is 1/16 of a teaspoon. If you can figure out how to do that, good luck. For me, it's like 4 cracks of salt. Good enough. Maybe that was 3. I'm not counting. You can hear that my first batch on the apples is done. So I'm going to go back, give them a little stir, and put them back in for 90 seconds. And that way, the butter gets melted, the apples move around, they get softer, a little bit easier to use. There you go. Okay. To that, I'm going to add 3/4 of a cup of milk. So again, using the same measuring stick. Now I know that there's people out there, lots of people, including me, that go, but a liquid fluid measuring 3/4 a cup isn't the same as a dry measuring cup. Sure, whatever. I know that's right. For this recipe, it doesn't matter. 3/4 of a cup dry, 3/4 of a cup wet, works just fine. And to that we add 4 eggs. So we're just going to throw those in there. I'm imagining on a later episode I will show how You can use one bowl to make pancakes using dry and wet ingredients in the same bowl. Again, not standard, but let's face it, this is a kitchen where you're cooking for your friends or your family, and you know, you're doing all the cleanup. How much cleanup do you want to do? Okay, so that's 4 eggs. We've got our flour, our milk, our salt. Just give that a stir. Break the yolks up into them because the yolks are going to be yolks, and so we need to mix them around, get the flour going in. The reason I like doing this before I put the apples into the pie plates is it gives a chance for the flour to be fully hydrated into the pancake mix. Otherwise you end up with some pockets of flour that might be hanging out, and that's okay, but you want it to be a relatively smooth batter. There are some pancake batters or waffle batters that you actually want to have lumps in it. This is not one of those. If you can get this relatively lump-free, that's a good idea. Okay, and so we're going to get it mixed up and ready to go. And just, you can see what's happening when you're doing this yourself. You'll be able to see whether or not the eggs are fully mixed in or not. If you really wanted to, you could use a separate bowl and mix the eggs and the milk together in a separate bowl, really whip them up good, and then put them into the dry. Sure, you do you. Or put the dry into the wet. You do you. This is not one of those recipes where it's really critical to have a wet and dry set of ingredients. Okay, so once we get this all mixed up, you'll see that yeah, it's looking fine. It's looking pretty, where are we? There we go. It's looking pretty all right. So I don't want to spill it again like I did in the broth the last time. And we just put that off to the side. Over there. Next we take our pie plates and we want to, I'm going to grab the apples. So what I would normally have done is start the apples beforehand because now they're quite hot. So I'm not going to be able to use these for a while. But I did do some before you got here, so we can. Now, I have a second butter dish, and this butter is butter that I've made. So, I'm still trying to figure out how to do an episode where I show you how to make butter. Because making butter is A, fun, B, given the price of butter, cost effective. At Costco, at present, butter is about $4.89 a liter, or a quart, and what happens is the price of butter, now butter's come down a little bit at Costco and it's about $5 a pound, but butter at other stores can be more. We were in Victoria a few weeks back, and the price of butter at Costco was $5 a pound, $4.95. The price of butter in one of the smaller grocery stores in one of the neighborhoods was $9 a pound. So they bought their butter from Costco, I'm guessing, or elsewhere, and then the price of it just skyrocketed when it hit the shelves. So one of the things that I've talked about in the last episode, we'll talk about again, is we are trying to think about how we're going to save some money, save some butter. And, you know, I guess in preparation for Easter, it's the Easter celebration next weekend, Walmart had eggs on for $2.66 a pound, I think it was. Regular price $4.04 at time of filming. So, you know, that's almost a 40% discount on eggs. You know, you can't stock up tons of eggs, but you can stock up on a couple, 3 dozen, throw them in the fridge, and they'll be fine for a while. Use them in the next month or so. There you go. Or make this recipe a couple times, and because it takes 4 eggs, you'll use 8 eggs. Woohoo! Great use of eggs. All right. So now we have our pie plates buttered. Okay, just like that. Then we're going to take our apples. We want to be careful with this because there is apple juice that's come out of it and butter in there. And we're just going to spread these around. Now, before we do that, I'm going to add what's called turbinado sugar. turbinado sugar is like a really crystally sugar that is much less processed than white sugar, even brown sugar. So this has natural molasses still in it. And I just sprinkle a little bit in the bottom of the pan. And what this does is it just creates this nice crunchy base of sweet sugar. It is one of those things where the turbinado sugar adds a nice yummy sweet crunch to food. Okay? Whether you're making pancakes or whether you're making cookies or what have you. Okay? And it's spendy, so you don't use a lot of it, but it is kind of nice to use some of it. And then as you're just spreading this out in the pan, you just want to make sure you get your apples in a nice little design or whatever. You know, this is one of those dishes that at the end of the day, there's two ways of serving it. One is upside down so you can see the apples, and the other is right side up so you can. And really, it doesn't matter which way you serve it. I tend to do both because this recipe makes two, and so when you're doing it, you know, you can be fancy with one, and then just sort of like splop the other one out and away you go, because it's part of the good fun. Okay? So, as you can tell, I've almost got one done, and sometimes if I'm worrying about how many apples I have, I might do them at the same time so that it is, you end up with the spirals coming out looking the same or similar-ish. That's okay. In this case, I've got lots, and I do that because if I'm running low on apples, you know, you spread the spirals out a little bit, or you make them a little bit less spirally, whatever. And what happens is you end up with this really pretty looking plate that I'll show you in 2 shakes, and you end up with a nice looking base line. That turbinado sugar in the oven is going to melt ever so slightly, and it's going to both melt and crisp up, kind of a weird combination, but it makes for a really pretty look. And when I pull the other plate out, I'll flip one over and I'll serve one straight up. Okay, and so here we go. If we are just putting that in, just do a quick hand wash here. You can see where now we have the spiral dish. Okay, that's one, that was two. Of course, they're not all the same. That's cool. But what you end up with is, oh, look at this. Oh my goodness gracious. You have the magic of leftover butter and also apples. So what I like to do with this is I like to mush up the apples and the butter together. And as we're just mushing this up, not really carrying on that much, what we're going to do is then add this into the batter. And what this will do is create this really neat flavor in the batter and make it really, really yummy. Okay? Also adds a little bit of body to it. Just gonna clean that off a bit. And the other thing I like to do with these, because you know it's a fancy morning type thing, I like to throw a little bit of extra flavoring in this. This is a butterscotch liqueur, and my hands are wet, so I have to do that. So about 2 tablespoons of liqueur. You do you. If you want more, add more. If you want less, don't put as much in. If you don't want any, you can use vanilla. You can use maple syrup. You could use whatever you want to, just a little different. Okay? And so what you're going to end up with is, in very short order, just like a apple mush. Okay? The apple mush goes into the apple butter. And then we just want to stir that in to combine it, because it makes it for better batter. Also what happens, you'll notice that the batter is going to get just a little bit glossy. Maybe you can't tell quite so well on the screen, but it's going to get a little bit glossy. And that just means that it's getting to the yummy stage. You'll also notice if you're stirring yours, there's not a lot of lumps. A couple's not a big deal. Some's not terrible. And away we go. Clean off our fork, make sure it's all in there. Clean off our finger. And then what I like to do, just because I care about this sort of stuff, is to now take a spatula and pour a little bit in one bowl, one pie plate, pour a little bit in the other pie plate, and then just sort of go around and get the rest of the yumminess out onto it, sort of see what's going on in terms of how the batter is covering the apples or not. And you want the apples, of course, covered in a bunch. It is going to puff up a little bit in the oven. So again, the oven is at 400 degrees, and I do mine for 22 minutes because I've done this for several years, so I know exactly the time it takes. It'll shake, and that 22 minutes lets your pancake puff up, rise a little bit. I'm going to show you this one, and then it's also it doesn't really show much of anything. Okay, you can sort of see it there, but it's not moving around. That didn't work out the way I thought it would. What happens is you puff it up a bit, and you end up with a really yummy, puffy pancake at the end of it, as you'll see in a little over 2 minutes. For the topping on this, I use 4 or 5 teaspoons of white sugar. I use a solid teaspoon or 2 of brown sugar, and then because I've got the turbinado, I'm going to use a couple of teaspoons of turbinado, so you get a little bit of that crunchy sugar on top. 3, there we go. And to this, add about a 1/4 teaspoon or so of cinnamon. Again, I just eyeball it because it's not much, right? A little bit more, not a big deal. A little bit less, not a big deal. What happens is you end up with, as you stir this around, and you have to, this one is helpful to see, you'll start just moving it back and forth, and what you end up with is this great little sugary, cinnamony topping for on top of your pancake. Okay? And so, because brown sugar's often got little, balls up, etc., sometimes you end up with little balls of brown sugar. There you go. Okay? So that is our first batch of these that are ready. And so a bit of a combination of magic, and I'm telling you what the magic is. It's not that magical. Here we go. We have our pancakes. When I said it puffed up, wasn't kidding. That's 1. And this is 2. Okay, so I'll plate those in just a second. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to either, if you're not comfortable, by all means, use that fork you used to stir it up, or use a spoon to sprinkle this on. I'm just going to do a light dusting like this, stir it up a little bit more, go to the other one, do the other one, and what you want to do is just do a light covering of the sugar and cinnamon mix, so that when it cooks, you're getting both a little bit of sugar on the bottom, a little bit of sugar on the top. The other great thing about this is if you make too much, you keep this on the counter, and during the week, you can make yourself cinnamon toast, right? Toast up a piece of bread, a little bit of butter, a little bit of cinnamon sugar. Oh man, dude, we're talking the best. Okay, cinnamon toast, middle of the week, cooking with gas. Okay, here we go. These go into the oven, and oven again, 400, 22 minutes. And away we go. So here we have it. We are ready to plate our German apple or Cornish apple pancake, depending on which way you want to call it. Again, if you've added the apples into it, I call it Cornish apple. If you haven't, you're just looking at German apple. Now, I said I would do one up, one down. So we're going to do the first one up. Sorry, flip it over. I guess it's up. Because if it doesn't work, then you don't do the other one. So I've got a big thick spatula that I picked up at, I think, IKEA, and you just flip it over and away you go. Scrape out the bottom of the pie dish to get all the good stuffed apple out. And because that worked out okay, I think we're going to do the other one upside down. And so that's what the bottom looks like. Okay. The other one we're going to take over here, and we're going to do the same thing. So carefully take your spatula. Again, it's a wide spatula for me, the one I like. Now, because you've added that butter to the base of the pan, these things normally come out reasonably well. Every now and then you get a little bit of fight back from it, in which case start off by just making sure the edges are clean and that you can slip your spatula underneath it and just draw it out. Okay? Now you're going to end up with a little bit left on the pan, always do, at least I always do, and because I don't like to waste anything, I just scrape that down, put that on top, and away you go. So here is the way this one looks up top. So you have to decide which you prefer. Again, I always like to do the two. So I've got one that has been flipped over, one that's just popped out. Okay. That took, not including the cooking of the apples, which are now sitting in the fridge itself. We'll do some of those later. That took about 24 minutes, 25 minutes. So you can crank out a really nice breakfast for your family or yourself or company if you've had company, and away you go. The beautiful thing with this is it's yummy. It's not overly sweet. Unlike sort of the Dutch, you may have seen Dutch baby pancakes. You don't have to have a cast iron pan that's hot as the dickens. This just gets done in pie plates, bang, like that, you're ready to go. Thanks a lot for checking out the kitchen. If you're making this for Easter next week, if you're watching this between now and then, I know I've had 28 views on the first video. My goodness, we're up there. You know, you got something to make next week. If you see this down the road, you got something to make whenever you want to, because it makes for a great breakfast. A lot of fun, yummy, tasty, and it's kind of fancy. So you got that going for you. All right. Thanks again for watching the second episode. I look forward to cooking with you again. And please continue to subscribe. I think I'm up to 3 subscribers. Woo! And howdy y'all. And as this gets more and more along, we're going to start doing some different things. Lots of plans for the future. And if there's anything that you want to see that you've heard me talk about, or you just want to see how it's done, I'll try. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you soon. Bye now.